My name is Halley, and today I'll be talking about deriving desirable generative artistic distributions from individual identity statements. Give me 1 second. There we go. So that's a lot in the title, so let's unpack it.
I'm connected to your Wi-Fi, but I can't access the internet. Could you check your connection and try again, please?
I'm trying.
It's on. As far as I can tell, they can see it.
Okay.
Just keep going.
I'm just going to keep going. Okay. So unpacking the title, an identity statement is a statement given by a user designed to generate a collection of art rather than a single piece. This could be as broad as a manifesto detailing their exact ideas about the medium of poetry, or as simple as something meant to unify an album of music. An artistic generative distribution is a generative distribution over some sort of art, visual art, poetry, short stories, music, conditional on such an identity statement in this context. And we consider such a distribution desirable if it has high diversity and quality over a large sample of output when you repeatedly sample it, while always satisfying the identity statement. So just focus on the red column in red here. Basically, the process is going to involve using the identity statement to get enhancement text. The enhancement text is generated by the LLM in a probabilistic manner. Then we use the enhancement text and the identity statement in a prompt with a rubric to generate art. So all we're doing is really a simple process. We're adding text stochastically to a prompt to generate poetry or art, but we find that by doing this, we can drastically increase diversity. And here's a preview of results. Now, if you look at the naive results, which are just querying Dolly on the identity statement given, you see that it's very beautiful, it's very impressive, but you wouldn't want to look at 5 more of them because you've kind of seen what you've seen. On the other hand, if you look at our enhanced prompt, you'll see that they all draw inspiration from space and astronomy, creating art that explores the cosmos in individual ways. You might actually want to see another 5 of those. You might want to see a book of those. And that's what we're aiming for. So here are the technical details. This is based loosely on a cultural, theoretic, literary, anthropological field called structuralism, which basically says there are universal themes and oppositions in art and in culture and in society, and they're all the same. Universal themes like nature or oppositions like individual versus collective identity, which can manifest as discourses rather than yes or no. For instance, if you have the identity statement, I'm a yoga enthusiast, and the opposition timeless versus contemporary, it wouldn't just be like, oh no, yoga is timeless. It could be blends ancient poses with futuristic landscapes, showcasing yoga as a timeless practice thriving in a rapidly changing world. And we're going to use ChatGPT to do this. We're going to use ChatGPT to identify the themes and discourses and assess their probability relative to a given prompt. So here's the basic idea. We sample simultaneously themes and discourses. Discourses are sampled first by sampling binary oppositions, which is a fixed list, and then sampling the discourses, which are individual texts per identity statement. We include this in the enhancement text, and then we feed the enhancement text plus the identity statement to LLM, which is cleverly designed to generate a maximally high quality poem conditioned on that identity statement and enhancement text. And so I'll go into results. First of all, can we quantify without a user study, because unfortunately I wasn't able to obtain IRB approval in time, can we obtain quantitative results on how well this does? Well, I can go into details of how we quantify this after my talk. But basically what we see using basic quantitative metrics is that with goodness of distribution, whether the variety reflected the variety inherent in the poetry domain, we found that our method strongly approached the naive approach, where the naive approach was just feeding to ChatGPT, write a poem about this prompt, and then giving it the prompt. In terms of quality, we also saw useful improvements, even though that wasn't the goal of the project. And with specificity to identity, or whether they were conforming to identity distributions, we found that they actually both, the structuralist approach and the naive approach, did did quite well, and there was no statistically significant difference between them. So these results are quite strong. Now I'll let you look for yourself, and you'll see again what I mean. This is the naive approach with the statement, I am a yoga enthusiast. So if you just look at these three, and they're all a little bit longer, I cut them all off, but they're all basically the same thing. They got the same rhyme scheme, same stanzas. If you look long enough, they have the same themes. They're all saying the same thing in a different way. And I refer to this as latent mode collapse. The latent variables inherent to poetry, like rhyme scheme, like meter, like is this from this century? It's always choosing the same thing. So even though the words aren't not diverse, they're basically, you've got a mode collapse of the latent variables that are so important to poetry. In contrast, if you look at the structural approach, you can just look that each one looks different visually on the page. And if you look at in more detail, they're doing different things. Now, I can't claim that looking different on the page is enough to create high diversity poetry. Wallace Stevens has a great quote about this, where he's like, some people just insert new lines and squiggles and uppercase letters and things that created like radically new poetry. No, you haven't. But the converse is definitely true, where if you're not doing this, you're not creating new collections of poetry. So discussion and conclusions. It's difficult to measure the effectiveness in the non-text domains because we relied on ChatGPT being able to evaluate the output, which obviously is problematic in itself. So we really need user studies. The output can feel invalidating when it mind reads inaccurately, which it necessarily does. And what I mean by mind reads inaccurately is you have your idea, and this goes back to the Midjourney talk. You have your idea of what you meant by this is my relationship to my chronic illness, but it really reads it a different way. It assumes a subset that is not what you were assuming when you wrote that identity statement. And then it writes something that contradicts your felt experience, and then you feel invalidated. So and that actually happened to me. This is like personal experience. So future studies should go to how to present this technology to users to most empower them, not just how to improve the technology, but how to improve how it's presented. Also, the process relies on ChatGPT, which is biased, so we need to work on continuing efforts to debias LLMs. But structuralist approaches do something good. They achieve higher diversity of output and higher quality while still satisfying the identity statement. They allow for exploration of underrepresented in narratives, both personally and at scale. And by personally, I mean they allow you to really meaningfully explore the full dimensions of the narrative that you're trying to understand by encompassing multiple themes, multiple discourses, multiple approaches to it, in contrast to the naive approach. This also democratizes the creative process. From the previous talk, I think there was a slide where the great speaker was mentioning all the things that you have to think about when you're doing art, beat making, label writing, drum creation. I think you didn't even realize that it takes like 16 steps to write a hip hop beat. But now someone can say, I want to write a hip hop album that embraces chaos, but within the realm of hip hop, and have that happen. So that is really the world that sort of I'm aiming for. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you. We have time for some questions. Yes. Wait for the mic.
First, I'd like to say that is an extremely clever piece of work. That's just elegant and interesting, and kudos. I'm really interested in sort of the reverse of it, which is this idea of measuring latent mode collapse. Because there's a lot of time when everybody kind of gets sort of locked into the same point of view and the same way of articulating it with slight differences, and being able to detect that would be very useful in my work. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Do I need us? Oh, right. Sorry. Well, I can't say I do, because this is not what is happening here. There is definitely a phenomenon in psychology where people sort of homogenize. But here what you see is that if you ask ChatGPT to write a Cummings-like poem, it can write a poem with all those weird squiggles and new lines that Wallace Stevens was complaining about. It can even write like really good sounding poetry in the style of Yeats. It just does it without prompting. Without prompting, it defaults to this weird arbitrary thing that it thinks is the default state. So I can't talk about people because I think this is a technically distinct phenomenon.
Could you detect it though? I mean, in the model, you said that you can look at it. Say,
You can absolutely quantify. If you quantify on latent variables, you can say, like, if you just generate condition, write me a poem prompt, and then write me a poem conditioned on this, and you look at, and you have ChatGPT identify the rhyme schemes, you absolutely do see that there's a lack of variety. What I'm saying is that's not the same thing as humans providing the model a lack of variety, because the model clearly has seen other poetry.
oh yeah. No, I'm talking about people working in general together as they kind of do their own mode collapse.
Yeah, I think we'd have to do a study to find out if that's actually the same phenomenon or not.
Agreed. It's just that I've been looking for a measure. That's a neat way of looking at it.